A social worker at a domestic violence shelter has been working with a client after she was severely beaten by her husband. The client informs the social worker that her husband has been attending anger management classes, is very apologetic, and that she sees a change in him. The client is considering moving back in with her husband and wants to know if the social worker thinks it's a good idea. The social worker does not feel that this is a good idea and is concerned about the client's safety. What should the social worker do first? Okay, of course, we are going to first point out what the question is asking, and it just basically wants to know out of these answer choices, what should the social worker do first, which means what is the most critical thing and what takes priority out of all these choices or out of the ones that make sense. So we are going to read through all of the all of the options, and then we're going to go back into the scenario and pull out exactly what we need to determine what the social worker should do first. So, option A, should the social worker first discuss what changes the client is seeing in her husband? That is something that the social worker could do. Option B, would the social worker first suggest that the client get her own place? I think we will eliminate this one right off the back because if we know that according to the code of ethics, this option takes away the client's self determination. You know, it's not really the social worker's place to suggest that the client get her own place when that's not even an option on the table. All the scenario is stating is that the client wants to know if the social worker feels like it's a good idea. Okay. So, suggestion anything outside of the box is not really appropriate at this point. So, I think before we even get down to the other options, some of the choices you know that you can eliminate right off the bat. Option C, should the social worker first recommend couples therapy? That may be something as well that the social worker may want to do. Is it something she should do first? We don't know yet because we have not yet examined all of the options. So, option D, should the social worker first disclose how the social worker really feels about her returning home? Here's the deal with this one. We as social workers, we never want to impose our values on the clients. So, even though she feels a certain type of way, she does not have to disclose it, even though the client is asking. So giving her personal thoughts is not the best therapeutic response because this is all about the client and what's good for the client, not what the social worker feels is good for the client. So we always want to keep that self determination and that empowerment on the client's behalf. So we are going to eliminate that one. Usually, it is two of the answer choices that you can eliminate right off the bat. Not always, but most of the time there is. So now we have options A and C, either to first discuss what changes the client is seeing in her husband or recommend couples therapy. So when you see first, you want to keep in mind that we are dealing with the helping process. So, in regards to the situation, whatever your role is, whatever the place that you're working, you still have to consider the helping process, especially when they're asking you first and next questions. Okay, so we need to determine what takes priority and what is the most important. So the social worker is working at a domestic violence shelter. And so the woman was severely beaten by her husband. Okay, severely beaten. So now the husband is going to anger management classes. He's been very apologetic, and the client feels like she sees a change in him. Okay, so we want to pay attention to what's going on with the client, what the client is saying, what the client is feeling. Okay, so the client is considering moving back in with her husband and wants to know if the social worker thinks it's a good idea. So this is pretty much what we need to pull out from this question. Yes, we have the background and everything, but what this question is asking, what we should do first about, is this. Okay. The client wanting to know, this is the presenting issue here, the client wanting to know if the social worker thinks it's a good idea. So you have to be able to pull exactly what you're answering out to get the right, to arrive at the right answer. So in this case, this is what the presenting issue is in this scenario. So if the social worker doesn't feel like it's a good idea, like it says here, should the social worker discuss what changes the client is seeing her husband first, or should she just right off the bat recommend couples therapy according to the helping process? When we see first or next, we always want to keep the helping process in mind. I mean, you want to keep it in mind all the time, but especially when you're dealing with first and next. So here, the first thing, according to the helping process, when we're dealing with clients and stuff, we also want to kind of assess them for their feelings, meet them where they are before we start offering suggestions and interventions and education and all that kind of stuff. So let's just see what she's thinking, where she is mentally, where her emotions are, and what she's feeling and why she's feeling. So recommending couples therapy would be out because we need to kind of first see how she's feeling. Suggesting therapy with the husband first, it shouldn't be done before the client understands the possible risk of going back into that situation. And I say that because whenever we discuss what changes the client is seeing in her husband, we can also discuss things that are that will open up a discussion for more things to be discussed around the nature of the situation. So discussing it openly, getting the client's thoughts and feelings about it. Um, in that process, the social worker can also help the client to understand the risk of going back into that situation before any other decision is made. So just opening up a discussion about it by seeing how the client feels is the first thing that you would do.